Imagine a place on Earth where sunlight has never reached. Not once, not even in the earliest moments of its existence. A world sealed in darkness, crushed under immense pressure, starved of oxygen, cut off from the rhythms that define life as we know it. And yet, something lives there. For centuries, scientists believed that life on Earth was bound to a simple rule. Energy comes from the sun, plants capture sunlight, animals consume plants, and entire ecosystems are built upon this delicate chain. Remove the sun, and the system collapses. At least, that's what we thought. But deep beneath the surface of our planet, far below oceans, ice sheets, and even solid rock, there exists a hidden ecosystem that defies this fundamental assumption. A place no one expected to survive. And yet, it does. This is the story of the deep biosphere, one of the least explored, most mysterious ecosystems on Earth. A realm so vast, so alien, that it challenges everything we understand about life itself. To truly grasp its significance, we must begin with a simple question. What does life actually need to survive? For most organisms, the answer seems obvious. Sunlight, water, oxygen, and nutrients. These are the building blocks of ecosystems we observe on the surface. But life, as it turns out, is far more adaptable than we once believed. In the late 20th century, scientists began exploring environments previously thought to be completely inhospitable. Deep-sea trenches, volcanic vents, and polar ice revealed something unexpected: life not only surviving, but thriving in extreme conditions. These organisms, known as extremophiles, rewrote the boundaries of biology. They lived in boiling water, in acid strong enough to dissolve metal, in radiation levels that would kill most known life forms. And perhaps most astonishing of all, they lived without sunlight. Instead of relying on photosynthesis, these organisms used a different process: chemosynthesis. They drew energy from chemical reactions, harnessing compounds like hydrogen sulfide, methane, and iron. Energy without the sun. This discovery alone was revolutionary. But it was only the beginning. Because as scientists continued to probe deeper, literally drilling into the Earth's crust and sampling sediments from the ocean floor, they began to uncover something even more extraordinary. Life wasn't just surviving in extreme environments. It was living deep inside the Earth itself, kilometers beneath the surface, hidden within microscopic fractures in rock, existing in complete isolation from the world above. At first, the findings were met with skepticism. Could these organisms really be alive? Or were they simply remnants, trapped biological material from a distant past? But evidence quickly mounted. Samples extracted from deep boreholes revealed active microbial communities. These organisms were not only alive, they were metabolizing, reproducing, and evolving. Slowly, incredibly slowly. In some cases, scientists estimated that individual cells divided only once every few hundred years. An almost incomprehensible pace of life. And yet, life nonetheless. This hidden biosphere extends far beyond isolated pockets. In fact, researchers now believe it may represent one of the largest ecosystems on Earth, possibly containing more biomass than all surface life combined. A shadow world beneath our feet. But how does life survive in such an environment? The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the answers became. Down there, conditions are extreme in ways that challenge even the hardiest extremophiles. Temperatures can exceed 120 degrees Celsius. Pressures are immense. Nutrients are scarce. And oxygen is virtually non-existent. Yet somehow, these organisms persist. They rely on chemical energy sources embedded in the Earth itself. Reactions between water and rock generate hydrogen gas. Radioactive decay splits molecules, creating reactive compounds. Minerals provide electrons that microbes can use to fuel their metabolism. It is a world powered not by sunlight, but by the planet's internal chemistry. A completely different foundation for life. And perhaps most astonishing of all, many of these organisms appear to be incredibly ancient. Some microbial communities have been isolated for millions of years. cut off from evolution on the surface, developing in silence, in darkness, in conditions that have remained largely unchanged for geological timescales. It raises a profound question. Are these organisms relics of early Earth? Or are they something else entirely, a separate branch of life, evolving independently beneath our feet? Scientists began to realize that the deep biosphere might hold clues not just about extreme life, but about the origin of life itself. Because early Earth was a vastly different place. The surface was hostile, bombarded by radiation, dominated by volcanic activity, and largely devoid of oxygen. But beneath the surface, conditions may have been far more stable, protected, chemically rich. It is possible that life did not begin in warm, sunlit pools, but deep within the Earth's crust, hidden from the chaos above. If this is true, then the deep biosphere is not just an anomaly, it is a living time capsule, a glimpse into Earth's earliest ecosystems. But as researchers continued their investigations, they encountered something even more puzzling. Something that didn't quite fit. Because in some of the deepest, most isolated environments, they found organisms that seemed too active, too complex, too abundant, for conditions that should barely support life at all. It was as if these ecosystems were not just surviving, but adapting in ways no one had predicted. And that's when the mystery deepened. Because if life can exist here, thriving without sunlight, without oxygen, sustained only by the chemistry of rock and water, then the implications extend far beyond our planet. It suggests that life may not be as fragile, or as rare, as we once believed. And it raises a possibility that is both thrilling and unsettling. What if Earth is not unique? What if similar ecosystems exist elsewhere, in the frozen subsurface of distant worlds, hidden beneath ice, rock, and darkness? As scientists turned their attention to these questions, they began to uncover patterns, connections that pointed toward something much larger than a single hidden ecosystem. Something that would reshape our understanding of life in the universe. But before we can explore those possibilities, we must go deeper. Because what scientists discovered next was even more surprising. Because what scientists discovered next was even more surprising. As exploration of the deep biosphere intensified, researchers began to notice a pattern that defied conventional biological logic. The deeper they drilled, the older and stranger the life forms became. In regions buried kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, microbial communities were found living in complete isolation from the surface world. No sunlight, no fresh nutrients, no connection to ecosystems above. And yet, they persisted. But something about these organisms stood out. They weren't just slow. They were operating on a completely different scale of time. Imagine an organism so energy-limited that it exists in a near-suspended state. It consumes just enough energy to repair its cells, to maintain its structure, to avoid death. But barely enough to grow. Barely enough to reproduce. Some scientists describe this as biological minimalism, life stripped down to its absolute essentials. In laboratory conditions, we measure life in seconds, minutes, hours. But in the deep biosphere, life is measured in centuries. Cells divide once every 100 years, sometimes even less. Entire ecosystems evolve at a pace so slow that, from a human perspective, they appear almost frozen in time. And yet, they are alive. This discovery forced scientists to rethink one of the most fundamental definitions of life. Is life defined by activity, by reproduction, or simply by persistence? The deeper researchers looked, the more it became clear that life does not require abundance. It requires resilience. But the mystery didn't end there. Because alongside these ultra-slow organisms, scientists also discovered something unexpected: pockets of relative abundance. In certain regions, microbial populations were far denser than predicted. Chemical gradients within the rock created localized energy sources, allowing ecosystems to flourish in otherwise barren environments. These were underground hotspots of life, hidden oases within the deep biosphere. And within these hotspots, researchers observed complex interactions, microbes exchanging chemicals, forming networks, even competing for resources. It was an ecosystem in every sense of the word, but one built on entirely different rules. Here, energy flows not from the sun, but from geological processes. The Earth itself becomes the engine of life. One of the most important mechanisms behind this is a process known as serpentinization. When water interacts with certain types of rock deep within the Earth's crust, it triggers a chemical reaction that produces hydrogen gas and other compounds. These molecules become fuel. Microbes use them to generate energy, forming the foundation of an entire ecosystem. What's remarkable is that this process does not depend on external input. It can continue for millions of years, as long as water and rock are present. A self-sustaining system, independent of sunlight, independent of the surface world. Scientists began to realize that these environments are not just rare anomalies, they may be widespread across the planet. Beneath ocean floors, within continental crust, under vast ice sheets. In fact, estimates suggest that the deep biosphere could extend several kilometers down, encompassing a volume of Earth far greater than all surface habitats combined. A hidden world, larger than anything we see above. But perhaps the most astonishing discovery came from genetic analysis. When scientists sequenced the DNA of these deep-dwelling microbes, they found something unexpected. Many of them were unlike anything seen on the surface. Entire branches of the tree of life, previously unknown. Organisms with metabolic pathways that defied existing models. Biochemistry adapted to extreme pressure, heat, and scarcity. It was as if evolution had taken a completely different path underground. And in some cases, these organisms appeared to be ancient, descended from lineages that may date back billions of years. Living fossils. Survivors of a time when Earth itself was young. This raised a profound possibility. What if the deep biosphere is not just a refuge for life, but a cradle? What if life began here, deep within the Earth, and only later spread to the surface? The idea is not as far-fetched as it might seem. Early Earth was a hostile place. Intense radiation bombarded the surface. Asteroid impacts were frequent. The atmosphere lacked oxygen. But beneath the surface, conditions were stable. Protected. Rich in chemical energy. Hydrothermal systems could have provided the perfect environment for life to emerge, sheltered from the chaos above. In this view, the deep biosphere is not an anomaly. It is a remnant of Earth's earliest ecosystems. A living archive of our planet's origins. But as compelling as this idea is, it leads to an even bigger question. If life can originate and persist in such environments on Earth, could it do the same elsewhere? Scientists began to look beyond our planet, to places where sunlight is scarce or non-existent, worlds covered in ice, planets with no breathable atmosphere. At first glance, these environments seem lifeless. But beneath the surface, the conditions might be surprisingly familiar. Take the icy moons of the outer solar system. Beneath their frozen shells lie vast oceans, kept liquid by internal heat. In some cases, these oceans are in direct contact with rocky cores, creating the potential for the same kinds of chemical reactions that sustain life in Earth's deep biosphere. Hydrogen production. Chemical gradients. Energy without sunlight. It is, in many ways, a mirror of the environments found deep within our own planet. And this realization has transformed the search for extraterrestrial life. Instead of looking only for Earth-like planets with sunlight and atmospheres, scientists are now searching for subsurface oceans, for chemical energy, for hidden ecosystems. Places where life could exist, unseen. But there is one more layer to this mystery. Because even on Earth, we may not yet fully understand the extent of the deep biosphere. New drilling technologies are allowing scientists to reach greater depths than ever before. And with each new sample, new questions emerge. How deep does life really go? What are its ultimate limits? And could there be forms of life that are fundamentally different from anything we have ever observed? Because if life can adapt to such extreme conditions, if it can survive with almost no energy, if it can exist in isolation for millions of years, then perhaps we have only seen a fraction of what life is capable of. And as researchers continue to push deeper, both into the Earth and into the cosmos, they are beginning to confront a possibility that challenges everything we thought we knew. That life is not confined to narrow boundaries. It is not fragile. It is not rare. It is something far more persistent and far more universal. And what they discovered next would change our understanding of life forever. And what they discovered next would change our understanding of life forever. As scientific exploration pushed deeper into the Earth's crust, a new realization began to take shape, one that extended far beyond biology and into the very definition of habitability itself. The deep biosphere was not just a hidden ecosystem. It was a paradigm shift. For centuries, we defined habitable environments based on surface conditions: liquid water, moderate temperatures, sunlight, and atmospheric stability. These criteria guided our search for life both on Earth and beyond. But the deeper researchers looked, the more those assumptions began to unravel. Because life, it seemed, did not need ideal conditions. It only needed possibility. In the crushing darkness beneath the surface, microbes had adapted to pressures hundreds of times greater than those at sea level. Their cellular structures were reinforced. Their enzymes evolved to function under conditions that would destroy ordinary proteins. At temperatures once thought to be sterilizing, life persisted. At depths where nutrients were nearly non-existent, organisms survived on chemical traces so small they bordered on the immeasurable. It was no longer a question of where life should exist, but where it could exist. And that realization changed everything. Scientists began to re-examine environments across Earth that had previously been dismissed as lifeless. Deep within Antarctic ice sheets, microbial ecosystems were discovered, isolated for hundreds of thousands of years, surviving in subglacial lakes buried beneath kilometers of ice. In the deepest ocean trenches, life was found thriving under immense pressure, feeding on chemical compounds released from the Earth's interior. Even within solid rock formations, microbes occupied microscopic pores, forming vast underground networks invisible to the naked eye. The boundaries of the biosphere expanded, and kept expanding. But perhaps the most profound implication was not what we found on Earth. It was what these discoveries suggested about life elsewhere. Consider a planet like Mars. Today, its surface is cold, dry, and exposed to intense radiation. For decades, this led scientists to believe that life, if it ever existed there, was long gone. But beneath the surface, there may still be warmth. There may still be water, trapped in subsurface reservoirs. And most importantly, there may still be chemical energy. If life can survive kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, isolated from sunlight and sustained only by rock-water interactions, then similar ecosystems could exist on Mars, hidden just out of reach. And Mars is only the beginning. In the outer solar system, icy moons such as Europa and Enceladus harbor vast subsurface oceans beneath thick shells of ice. These oceans are warmed not by the sun, but by tidal forces, gravitational interactions that generate internal heat. Evidence suggests that these oceans may be in contact with rocky cores. If so, the same processes that sustain life in Earth's deep biosphere, serpentinization, hydrogen production, chemical gradients, could be occurring there as well. In other words, these distant worlds may not be barren. They may be alive, beneath the surface. The implications are staggering. It means that the universe may be filled with hidden ecosystems, worlds where life exists not on the surface, but deep below, shielded from harsh conditions. Invisible, undetectable, but very much alive. And yet, even as we look outward, the deep biosphere continues to challenge us here on Earth. Because despite decades of research, we have only explored a tiny fraction of it. Drilling projects reach just a few kilometers down. Ocean sampling captures only select regions. The vast majority of this hidden world remains inaccessible, unseen, unstudied, unknown. It is entirely possible that entire ecosystems exist beneath our feet that we have never encountered. Organisms with metabolisms we do not yet understand. biochemical processes that operate on principles we have not yet discovered, even forms of life that blur the line between biology and geology. The deeper researchers look, the more they realize how little we truly know. But perhaps the most profound impact of this discovery is philosophical. For most of human history, we have viewed life as something fragile, dependent on a narrow set of conditions, easily extinguished by change. But the deep biosphere tells a different story. It reveals life as something resilient, adaptable, persistent beyond expectation. Life does not simply exist where conditions are perfect. It endures where conditions allow it to, even barely. And this changes how we see our place in the universe. If life can thrive in the darkness beneath our feet, if it can survive without sunlight, without abundance, without connection to the world above, then perhaps it is not an exception. Perhaps it is the rule. A fundamental property of matter under the right conditions. Something that emerges again and again, wherever energy flows and chemistry allows. And if that is true, then the universe may be far more alive than we ever imagined. But there is still one final question. One that scientists are only beginning to explore. If life can exist in such extreme isolation, if it can persist for millions of years, evolving slowly, independently, then how different could it become? Could there be ecosystems beneath our feet that are not just hidden, but fundamentally alien? Organisms so adapted to their environment that they bear little resemblance to life on the surface? Biochemistries that operate on unfamiliar principles? Evolutionary paths that diverged so long ago that they represent entirely separate branches of life? We do not yet know the answer. But the possibility is there, waiting beneath us, in the silence of the deep biosphere. And perhaps that is the most humbling realization of all. That even on our own planet, we have not yet discovered everything. That beneath the ground we walk on every day lies a hidden universe, vast, ancient, and alive. A world no one expected to survive. And yet, it does.